That is not my theme song. Earlier, I got really excited about all the music in the background, and I thought, the DJ finally captured me, and then that was my song. Anyway, so good morning, everybody, and for those of you from the Northwest, wow, it's early, right? And so I'll just say morning, because I'm not clear how good it is. Thank you all so much for joining us. And we wanted to actually start off, before you hear from us, we want to start off with a video. How many of you saw the Academy Awards? I'm just going to do something. Tell me if this looks familiar. Clearly it does. I can tell who watched. So anyway, so what I wanted to do is we have this great video to just introduce you to the idea that there are synergies between this work. And so I would put this in sort of the category of a nominee for Best Documentary Film. Animated, short. And this is a place where we can learn a little bit about a student. From a student's perspective, how do students persist when they have so many challenges that are facing them? But students aren't the only people who are part of the dream. How do student services professionals help students to be successful? Sometimes they seem like parallel paths, but we want to show you how these two worlds come together to help you start thinking about this completion agenda. So I don't know sort of the official movie term, but sort of like role B or something like that.
Meet Sam. Sam is 18. He's smart, he's capable. Sam recently graduated from high school. He doesn't have a plan yet. He takes a summer job at the mall because it seems fun and easy. A year later, Sam is still living at home and working at the mall. He earns barely enough to cover his bills and have a little left over for fun. One day, Sam stumbles on Awesome Community College's website. He looks at a few pages of class descriptions and everything clicks. He sees himself sitting in the cockpit of a commercial jet or working as a trainer for a pro sports team. He didn't have great grades coming out of high school, but that's okay. Awesome opens its doors to everyone. Sam figures he'll jump right in and get to the good classes that will help him land a cool job that pays real money. He can't wait to get started. 3 years and 30 credits later, Sam is just like more than half of the other students at Awesome. He's still taking classes to catch up on things he didn't learn in high school. He works during the day, takes classes at night, and somehow still makes time to help his parents get to their doctor appointments. Sam is frustrated. Should he give up on his dreams? Sam still wants a different life for himself, so he perseveres. Meet Jen. Jen has been a career counselor at Awesome for 10 years. She loves her job and has helped thousands of students. The school has doubled its enrollment and expanded the campus twice to accommodate all the new students. Jen has a hard time keeping track of all the students coming through the campus career center. She often stays late, even when it means missing dinner with her family. Students come to her for advice on how to make the most of their studies at Awesome. She doesn't want anyone to fall through the cracks. Community colleges like Awesome have done a great job of opening their doors to serve more students than ever before. Jen and other staff, administrators, and faculty at Awesome struggle to keep up with the growing numbers of enrolled students, the requests for financial aid, and the rising cost of delivering a high-quality education every year. Jen and her coworkers feel overwhelmed by the challenge of serving so many students. Awesome is a victim of its own success. Jen and Sam are working hard to persevere under difficult circumstances. It's a national imperative for more students to complete college, and there are lots of groups working to help solve the challenge. They come to institutions like Awesome with different frameworks, models, interventions. For the community college administrators, faculty, and staff at Awesome, it's pretty confusing. How do they decide what's best for their school and their students when there are so many different approaches? Jen and her colleagues just want everyone to get on the same page, to work together and cut through the clutter so they can focus on what matters most, helping more students like Sam get their credential and have a better life. Achieving the Dream is a national nonprofit that is leading the nation's most comprehensive, non-governmental reform network for student success. It's working with more than 150 institutions in 30 states, each of them committed to the student-centered model of institutional improvement. Achieving the Dream helps colleges build a culture of evidence to improve the first-year experience and overall student outcomes. Achieving the Dream colleges are an ideal platform for disseminating innovative best practices. Completion by Design is a national initiative that's dedicated to significantly increasing completion rates for large numbers of students. Guided by the Preventing Loss, Creating Momentum framework, Completion by Design is working with groups of community colleges in Florida, North Carolina, Ohio, and Texas. Completion by Design takes a comprehensive approach, helping colleges use data to understand and redesign the student experience toward the goal of completion. Many Completion by Design colleges are also Achieving the Dream institutions. There's a lot of synergy between Completion by Design and Achieving the Dream. Both are eager to share what they know and what they're learning. Both are excited to learn more from their community college partners about how to help cut through the clutter. That way, Jen can be supported to do her great work and Sam can accomplish his goals. They're counting on us.
That is not my theme song either. At some point we will figure it out. I think that those characters are really familiar to most of us. You have students who are really struggling to figure it out, and you have student services, student support people who are really also trying to help students get there. You can't do one without the other. You can't have just an academic solution to completion without engaging your student services folks. So I think that that's a really important conversation for us to have. And thank you again for being here. The focus of our conversation is on completion, right? Nationally, we seem to be obsessed with completion. And we have lots and lots of ways of getting to completion, lots and lots of initiatives, as Carol talked about earlier. And we just want to talk about two today and talk about the ways that these two bodies of work come together, where they differ, and where there are opportunities for you to learn from each other. And so I am joined today by Bill Trueheart, CEO of Achieving the Dream, Nan Poppy, Executive Director of Completion by Design Assistance Team, and Steve Johnson, President of Sinclair College. I was going to say Sinclair University. I don't even know what happened to me just then. Sinclair College.
The music threw you.
The music threw me. And so I also wanted to just start out by saying, why does the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation care about this work? So we have a goal where we want most students who enter a community college to complete. Sounds simple enough, but really hard to get there. And our interest in this work really comes from our commitment to a social justice approach. We're really interested in figuring out how do we alleviate poverty? How do we stop the cycle of poverty in families? And what we've learned through our research is that if a person does not get a credential by the age of 26, that if they were born in poverty, they are much more likely to die in poverty. So 26 is a key age for us. The other thing, and I think most of you heard me say this last year, or you just heard me at NAID say this, I usually describe our work by saying we like to work on hard problems, right? Polio, malaria, higher ed. And so, it's true. So this is one of those hard problems. And what I wanted to do is just take a moment to hear first from Nan, to have her talk about completion by design, because I feel like in this room you may be familiar with Achieving the Dream. If you're not, there are people here to help you understand it. So Nan, just talk with us a little bit about what are the goals of completion by design, and how do you see maybe some initial connections with Achieving the Dream?
Sure. Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Suzanne. Before I get into that, I'd like to just take a moment to recognize the good work that each and every one of you in this room has done over the last several years. I think we all know that this journey to substantially increase student success and completion rates is really a long and arduous one. And there is no doubt that the design and implementation of completion by design would not have been possible without all the learning and the work of the initiatives that have come before us and the work at the college level. So thank you for all of that. I know it's really hard being in the trenches. But as you saw in the video, the goal of completion by design is to substantially increase the completion rates of our college students in 5 years while containing costs and maintaining access and quality. As you also saw in the video, we are starting in 4 states. In each one of those states, we have a lead college, which we call managing partner. And so in Ohio, that is Sinclair Community College. In Texas, it's the Lone Star System. In Florida, it's Miami-Dade College. And in North Carolina, it's Guilford Technical Community College. Those lead colleges then have brought together a cadre of other campuses in their state to work on completion by design. We also have a state policy lead because, as you know, state policy can really influence our completion rates. And we have embedded what we call a senior partner, which is a little bit like the model of your ATD coach, where this is a person who has a very strong background, particularly in change management, that we have embedded full-time in the cadre to work with the presidents and the staff on the change that we know is to come. So the foundation in recruiting colleges to be in completion by design, it was a very competitive process, wanted to start with colleges who were well on their way to working on the completion agenda. So most of the colleges in completion by design, it's no surprise, are also ATD schools. So our 5-year initiative unfolds. Year 1 is the planning year, which we're coming to a close on. Years 2 and 3 is to implement the plans then in our cadre campuses. And then years 4 and 5 are what we're looking towards in terms of scaling this initiative throughout the rest of the state. I'd like to just quickly touch on 3 key emphases for us. The first one is completion by design is really about deep, systemic, and structural change. It's not about pilots or testing individual interventions, but rather after doing a deep analysis of what is really going on with our students, engaging the entire campus, including the students, in why so many of our students are not reaching our goal, we're asking colleges to then come together in teams and create clear and intentional pathways that we feel will make it easier for students to reach their goals. By doing that, we believe that the colleges will be able to create a coherence and alignment of all their programs and services. The second area of emphasis for us is working across the full continuum of the student experience. We've created the Loss and Momentum Framework, which basically breaks their chunks of student experience into 4 buckets, which we call connection, entry, progress, and completion. And we think that if you really want to move the dial on completions, you have to rethink services and programs across the entire spectrum, from first contact to completion. In looking back when we did to design this initiative, what we found is that over the last decade, there has been lots and lots of grants where wonderful work was done in different areas or with different groups of students, but in the end, it really didn't move the dial on completion. And finally, I would say the third area of emphasis for us is working at scale. We have a saying that we want to start with scale. And how we came to that was, again, looking at past initiatives. And you'll recognize, I think, this cycle that we saw. You know, college gets a grant to focus on a particular area or a particular program or a particular group of students. They do really good work. They create champions, starting to see some good results. Grant money goes away. College was fully intended to sustain that. Money wasn't quite there. Champions move on to other things. College gets another grant. And so it was, and I don't want to imply that that happened every single time, but we all know it's really hard to scale our innovations that we start with grant programs. So our theory in going into it was to start with scale. So when looking at the interventions and changes, We want to do it for all students in that group. So that's basically what we're about.
No, I think that that's great, and I think, you know, just what I want you all to be listening for are where are the places where you're thinking, we could do that. That sounds familiar. Because part of what we're thinking about with this scale is also how do we share lessons? How do we share lessons with all of you that we're learning through completion by design? And one of the ways that we think about that is the role of achieving the dream. And we saw in that video, we talked a little bit about the sort of role of distribution for that ATD plays in kind of the larger community college world. Can you talk, Bill, a little bit about where you're seeing some synergies between completion by design and ATD?
Yes.
Okay, check.
Check, right. Before I answer that question, I just want to say that listening to Nan talk about completion by design made me think that the Gates Foundation is a good learner. I think you've paid attention to the work that has been done by all of the folks here in this room. And by the services that have been provided by our founding partners, and in designing completion by design, you took into account the strengths of the work and the lessons learned in a very deliberate way, and I applaud that. You could say it.
Well, I was just going to say, well, thank you. But I was also going to say there's another meeting going on right now with sort of our funding colleagues, so I don't know who else is in the room. But, you know, I think it's actually, you're seeing a trend through foundations. We're all...
There are over 10 people out there.
There are over 10. There's a bunch of them out there. But I think that foundations in general, we're all trying to get better. So there are a number of us who support achieving the dream. And I appreciate that feedback, but we're learning from everybody.
Surely. And so that long preface is a way of saying that we, in achieving the dream, and certainly at headquarters, and I believe I speak for our founding partners as well, are really enthusiastic about the way in which Nan is leading the effort to do the deep engineering solely focused on completion in the way that you're doing it, building upon the learnings that you have. And we see achieving the dream as the distribution channel and the laboratories for work that you're going to do, not only with the Achieving the Dream institutions that are presently in the completion by design system, but hopefully, as you learn, seeing you share that information so that we can share it with other Achieving the Dream institutions throughout the network. And we intend to continue with our business plan to add 20 to 30 Achieving the Dream institutions every year. And we're at roughly 150 institutions now actively involved, but we're well over 160 institutions that have been associated with Achieving the Dream and who still participate and with which we share information. So that distribution network, that national reform network, will be the beneficiaries of the work that you're doing and the work that we continue to do in Achieving the Dream. And when there are bright lights and there are ahas that you discover, and we hope you'll discover many, we're certainly, as a network, open to having you share with us those things, and we are eager to work closely with you to see if we can more broadly distribute what you learn.
So, one of the things that, Nan, you talked about was the fact that a lot of the colleges that we selected started out as Achieving the Dream colleges. And is there a reason that this group is the go-to group? And you guys know you're all in like 1,000 initiatives, and you're the first stop. So what is it about the connection between Achieving the Dream and completion by design? Why was that a great place to kind of go and think about dragging these folks into the next initiative?
Well, I think probably the greatest thing that ATD did for America's community colleges and their students is this focus that you had from the beginning on data. And, we always collected a lot of data in the community college system, but what we'd say is, our enrollment rates have gone up by 10%. We're serving, X number of more students. Or we look at persistence from fall to fall. But nobody was really paying attention to completion rates and what was really happening as students were progressing through the college and where we were losing them. And one of the data points that came out in doing our data analysis was how many students we have at the community college who have, and this is across the nation, who have been enrolled for 5 years or more, have earned at least 30 college-level credits, so they've made their way through DevEd, but they still, 5 years later, haven't earned a certificate or degree. And so I think then that culture of evidence that you established, and then like you're doing now, what we're trying to do in completion by design is then move that into a culture of inquiry where you really create the time and space on the campuses to sit down with students and with faculty and staff and try and figure out what that data means. And that's easy to say, but very hard to do in actuality. And so I think that's probably our biggest connection. I think another way that we're really similar is in both initiatives we start with the student, and everything we do is very student-centered.
Okay, Steve. So the joke, in our space is, wow, Sinclair's in every initiative. So what's it like to be in these particular initiatives? Where do you see synergies, and where do you see places where it's like, oh, I wish they actually worked better together?
Thanks, Suzanne. Well, good morning, everyone. It is so heartwarming to see all of you this morning and all of your concern for this very, very important national initiative. And it's the national initiative, I think, on 2 levels of number one, serving each and every one of our individual students who come to us to change their lives, and that's number one. Number two, the national call for improving college attainment rates and the skills of our citizens. And so those are not the same thing necessarily, but they're not mutually exclusive. And so it's so great to be with all of you today as we work across the nation, work with each other to improve on all of this. Sometimes it does feel like a joke when we're in all these initiatives at Sinclair, and sometimes it doesn't seem so funny. There is a lot going on, and we were founded at Sinclair. We were founded 125 years ago in 1887 as a college that was very focused on the local Dayton, Ohio economy, and we're very much a workforce college and an access college, an alignment to the community access college. And I've been at Sinclair for 10, 12 years now, and it's clear that Sinclair is an old institution that is obsessed and has been obsessed with connection to its local community, connection to the local economy, and its curriculum and services reflect that appropriately, and obsessed with access and enrollment. And that's nothing wrong with that at all. The Achieving the Dream, however, and other initiatives has helped our very large college with 2,600 employees and 40,000 credit students we serve a year shift and learn that completion is very important. You'd say, well, completion's always been important, right? It's just a given, but it's not been as important. It's not been an obsession. It's not like no one's been against completion. No one's been saying,
use that line. No one's been against completion.
No one's been against it. It's not like a 125-year history of let's not complete anybody. But, some days it feels like we've achieved that, but we have, because of Achieving the Dream, and because of data collection through SESI, for example, and through our work with a lot of the other initiatives, developmental education initiative, we have better data. We know who is doing well and who's not doing well, and it's horrifying in some respects. It's gratifying in others, and so this has been very helpful over the last, let's say the last decade, to shift our institution to have an ever greater obsession with completion. And the most satisfying evidence of this is where now the first thing that our Board of Trustees, we have an 11-person appointed Board of Trustees at Sinclair for our governance, the very first thing they ask now when they ask questions about the nature of our students and the nature of our results is not what is our enrollment, even though enrollment's really important, but what is our completion? What is our completion rates? Who's completing? Where are they completing? And are they getting jobs or are they transferring? And once they do that, are they successful? So there's been a tremendous shift in our governance.
And so when you think about the role that Achieving the Dream played in your world, and then you thought, we're going to apply for completion by design because we're not doing enough right now. We need another initiative. Why would you even decide to do yet another completion initiative?
Because it means that much to us. I think all of us in the room would agree that we're here and we do what we do because it means that much to us. There's a lot of other things we could be doing in life other than that which we're doing. But we've selected to do this each and every day because we find it satisfying and gratifying to do this kind of work, and we want to help people. We want to help the people that come to us to change their lives, and we want to help our communities, and we all want to help our nation and our states, our respective states. We all want to do that, and we're a little frustrated with what we're a little frustrated, and I think all of us will agree we'll about do anything that's reasonable, even if it's very, very hard and very onerous, and sometimes feels crazy. We're in all these different things. We will do whatever we need to do to improve the success of our students because it's improving our communities.
So what's the thing that's different about completion by design for you?
I think completion by design, from the view of the Ohio cadre, if I could speak for all of my colleagues at Stark Community College and Lorraine Community College and Sinclair and the Ohio Association of Community Colleges that are working now in this planning year, this first planning year, I'd say that this is an extension of work that had been done through Achieving the Dream and the Developmental Education Initiative and our work with CESI and GISS and work we've done through AACC and ACCT. It's a whole alphabet soup of work, but again, it's important. It's really important. And I think that this is just a natural progression in the evolution of our work to learn together to improve student success. And if I could just say this one other thing, and I'll try to make this brief. It's really becoming apparent to us in our collective consciousness that each and every individual student's life is a system. Each individual student's life is an entire system of relationships and activities and events and beliefs and hopes and aspirations and 24/7, 365, each individual student lives their life system. Each one of our colleges is a system or a collection of interrelated systems, and we try to get these two systems to match. And I recall early in my career, I worked in a private liberal arts college, and basically what we did in that college was we admitted students who agreed to pretty much connect their system to ours. Their life system really needed to match the system of our college. In other words, they needed to really be in line with our system. And in a community college, we basically say, bring your life system as is, and we'll figure out how to work with it. And what we're learning is that we need to do a better job of connecting the systems, and it's really, really difficult in some respects. But that's the kind of knowing and learning that we are getting, that this is, students aren't widgets. Students aren't, they're very, important individuals with lives that we need to connect to help get an education and be successful.
So everybody's talked about using data, and I feel like we're obsessed with data in higher ed, right? And our legislators are obsessed with it. Collect more data transparency. And yet, what I think is challenging is how do you use the data how do you actually, number one, use the data? And secondly, how do you use it in a way that is different than just I'm collecting numbers? How do you use it to make a set of different decisions? And so can you talk a little bit, Bill, about how ATD has been using data to maybe think about these full lives of a student, or just how do you envision data moving forward in achieving the dream, using data moving forward?
I should pass that question off to Steve.
Oh, I like it.
But I'll start and then invite Steve to comment. One of the things that most of us in higher education didn't really pay attention to, and I mean in higher education, 2-year, 4-year universities, was paying attention to learning what it was we were doing and learning what worked and what wasn't working. And so Achieving the Dream really focused on trying to get information about what was happening in the institution, in the classroom and outside the classroom, and information about the lives of the students in a purposeful way that hadn't been done in most institutions of higher education. And that was the huge watershed, I think, that took place, and it was appropriate that it took place in community colleges. As I look forward and think about how we use data, I think we have to be much smarter about defining which types of data we need and using technology much more cost effectively in order to get that data. And then we have to extract meaning from that data. And I think that's the key point. We need to learn from what it is we're asking people to collect in ways that will really allow institutions to make very smart decisions about what changes really truly need to be made. And so looking forward, ATD wants to work with all of the institutions that are in the Reform Network to be smarter about extracting meaning from the data that we have to collect and that we need to collect, so that we can be better institutions and more effective in serving our students.
Can you talk, or can someone on the panel just talk a little bit about, so, I think one of the other things that's happening with this data transparency conversation is that, as you're describing, there needs to be some meaning that we get from the data, and yet I think the challenge is other people are making meaning, making sense of our data for us. So in other words, what I'm thinking about is in this completion conversation, if you just give me your completion rates from Sinclair, and some of you may have seen some billboards in Texas, other people will make decisions about what that data means. How can colleges get on the front end of helping to redefine how we understand that data? Because the raw number isn't enough. So can you, I
would love to speak to that. Thanks, Suzanne. And playing off what Bill has said, at Sinclair, we have a graduation rate that is in the vicinity, the official graduation rate of our first-time full-time is approximately 10%. And so at a superficial level, that implies to some people that we have a 90% failure rate, and that 90% of our students fail. Yet we have other data from our community research that we do frequently that would indicate in our county, Montgomery County, Ohio, population 550,000 people, that approximately 50% of all adults living in the county have studied at our college. And they give us an approval rating of, each and every time we run our surveys, and have for decades now, they give us an approval rating in the 80s or 90%, and including the quality of our education. Sinclair is a steward of the local tax millage and all of that. So the notion that a 90% failure rate when you have half of the people living in a lot of people is just doesn't make sense. So and it isn't a 90% failure rate. We've also begun this, aside from trying to get the graduation rate up and working to get the graduation rate up, which it is our goal to double that within the foreseeable future. So that is important, but that aside, we're also now beginning to communicate broad and wide with our community and in our state the numbers of completers in key job areas. So the number, for example, we've completed 700 some registered nurses in the last 5 years, 500 some firefighters, 250 police officers. And so we are now really focusing on how many skilled professionals are going into middle-class jobs in our community. And we're not talking about percentages or rates as much as we're talking about the numbers there. Or I should say, we're not only talking about percentages and rates. So at the same time, we're working to improve our completion rates as officially measured and still measured, and that could change in the future. We are also talking in terms of data of the numbers of skilled professionals and in what professions and where they're going to work or where they're transferring and what happens to them after that.
Yeah, so one of the things, that's helpful because one of the things that happens in the world of healthcare and in Washington State in particular, so hospitals have to report mortality rates. And what is worse than having to admit how many people died in your care? You know, but yet we're scared within higher ed to talk about our graduation rates. Well, you know, I'm not saying we shouldn't be scared of that, but what I've learned from the hospitals is they give it context. They give that data context. And so in Washington, for example, there are hospitals that clearly their mortality rate and their rates of infection are much higher than others, often in lower income neighborhoods. And as one of the board members from one of these hospitals said, if I get a gunshot wound, take me over there to this particular hospital. I don't want to say which one, but take me to that particular hospital, not the one that gets the better mortality rates. Why? Because they're actually used to dealing with gunshot wounds. They're used to saying, oh, we actually have the best doctors who can work on this. And I bring this up because as you think about the role of community colleges and as you think about the data that we collect, the data may be stark, but being able to say we took students from this level and brought them this far, that's huge. How do you sort of start to think about the unique role that community colleges play, the way that you have to bring them along a whole continuum? It's not just we get the best patients and whoa, amazingly they all lived. That's not that easy.
And Suzanne, that would be great though.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Suzanne, sometimes we think of data with this analogy. Bloom's taxonomy, many of you will recall Bloom's taxonomy of cognitive learning, and it's not that the data is about Bloom's taxonomy, but in the taxonomy there's the lowest levels. You know and can recite facts at the lowest level of learning something. You just know facts about something, whatever those facts would be. And then as you progress through more sophisticated levels of knowing about something, you can synthesize and conceptualize and understand you have insight and deeper meaning to whatever that is. So just recall Bloom's taxonomy and Google it later and brush up on it.
But be careful because Google has new privacy settings starting today.
So what's the analogy? Just having some percentages and numbers is not enough. I mean, that's not that we can't confuse that with insight and understanding. So again, what you have just Susan, illustrated is that the hospital stats at the lowest level of understanding stats or information is just a fact. There's a mortality rate over here, there's a mortality rate. But understanding the more complex, having more insight into what's happening and being able to make wise choices based on insight. And that's exactly what we are working to do through Achieving the Dream and Completion by Design and the other initiatives. And when I say we, all of us in the room, I believe, and a number of other partners across the nation, to understand, okay, let's move now beyond these discrete facts and factoids and get better and deeper understanding of what's happening in each and every student's individual system of learning from entry to the point they leave us, and everything that goes on in that continuum, so that we can understand where we might not be doing so well, where we might be failing them, or they're failing themselves, and where we can help them not fail.
And so, Nan, I think that this is such an interesting way of thinking about the evolution of use of data. And as you think about where Completion by Design is going and how the colleges are beginning to use data, can you talk a little bit about Are you digging in? Are we thinking about the right things? Just how are we thinking about that?
Well, you know, excuse me, another part of that is completion by design. We've really had the benefit of all those pilots, all those demonstrations, all those grant programs before us. And as I said before, they may not have moved the dial on completion, but we learned a lot about what works. And I think we're at this stage in our community college history now that there's pretty much a growing consensus in the field about what works. So it's not like we need to kind of continually pilot new things. We need to just bring to scale the things that work. The other thing I think is that even though community colleges haven't been a hotbed for research and that we maybe don't have the gold standard, I think we have really benefited in the last few years from all the good research CCRC has done, and that we can use that to lead in where we're going. And I think the two biggest things, if I'm sure you've all read their reports, is this notion of really having to have coherence in our instructional and student support programs, and then that other really key piece of research that's kind of our benchmark in completion by design, that notion that we need to move students as quickly as possible into programs of study. And their research shows that if you can get a student into their program of study, which in completion by design we say is completing 3 college-level courses in that area, then they have a pretty good rate of completion. If you do it by the second year, then they have an okay rate. But if you don't get all your students into a program of study by the end of year 2, they have almost a 0 rate of completion. So I think it's also learning by all that good research that's being done.
And you know, I think what's so interesting about the completion conversation, so there are questions that I get asked all the time. First is, where did I get my shoes? And then and a woman asked me that in the elevator. I don't know where you are, but you asked me that this morning. So after that,
you might as well tell us.
Yeah. Oh, John Fluvog, fluvog.com. Also, just a big fan of eBay. But anyway, we'll talk shopping later.
After they Google Blooms.
And be careful of Google, and this is a lot of data that we're sharing. But after I get asked about my shoes, I am often asked, so there are just way too many completion initiatives. I, as a person at an individual institution, I have no idea how to make sense of it. So that's, so how do I do that? Why should I care about all of these completion initiatives? And it really is that latter part that I think is most interesting. Why should I care? And I loved, Steve, your comment about, no one's actually, no one's against completion. No one's actually against it, but it's hard to get the argument for it sometimes. And for people outside of higher ed, they're just shocked by that.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to ask each of you to do is just, why should we care about completion? And if we care about completion, do we give up on your dream of access and your 125-year dream of access?
No.
No.
No, we don't give up on it. We do not give up on
And
access.
why do we care about completion?
We care about completion because it's the moral and right and correct thing to do for each individual student that comes to us. They're coming to us to help us change their lives and to have a good middle-class life and solid middle-class life, and we are that pathway to that. Second, our local communities, our state, our nation need us, and that's a second reason. Just less than 24 hours ago, it was late yesterday afternoon, the reason I wasn't here earlier for this conference was Ohio Governor Kasich had requested that the community college presidents, those of us who could, and he really, really wanted us to meet with him in his cabinet office, cabinet room, with most of his cabinet and most of his senior staff. So yesterday afternoon, we had a long meeting with the governor, and basically he laid out three things that he wants to accomplish next in higher education in Ohio. One is the commercialization of basic research, and the second is improving completion rates. And he literally said a 10% graduation rate is not acceptable for any of us. It's not good for our students or good for our state. And so the second point, that second point is improving completion rates. And he went on to say, somehow, some way, we're going to have to tie state funding to completion rates. Ooh, I know, okay.
Ooh, listen to those responses. Get ready, everybody.
I guess I'm the messenger here.
Yeah.
Okay. The third point, and this is it, 1, 2, 3, and the third point, and part of the discussion was that he really wants Ohio's community colleges to pledge that we are going to give our heart and soul not only to improving completion rates, but do everything we can to fill the jobs that are open with skilled professionals. And so I tell you what, those the second two, point 2 and 3 for community colleges, that's completion by design. You know, it's like improving completion rates and helping people get credentials that are viable in the marketplace. So there's another reason. The governor said so.
So, Nan, I want you to answer that question, but also, is it only about completion by design, or is it, I mean, there are lots of other ways of thinking about completion. So do we care just because the governor says so? Do we care because funding's tied to it? Why should we care?
Well, first of all, you know, in this economy we live in this world we live in today, degrees and certificates matter. And I think you only have to look at the latest unemployment charts to see that. And people today, in this worst recession we've had since the Great Depression, who didn't have a certificate or degree or some sort of post-secondary training, have just really suffered the worst. So that's why we have to focus on completion. I mean, I think in terms of access, and I know that a lot of smart and thoughtful people have raised some serious questions about, is the completion agenda going to hurt the access or quality agenda? And I think we need to pay attention to that. But that I want to say on behalf of every single campus that's participating in completion by design, we do not see that the solution to completion is to limit the access agenda. In fact, we believe the opposite, that if we can come up with these new student-focused, completion-focused pathways, that we'll be able to serve more students and have more access. But in general, in response to you, Suzanne, on this access question, I think we also have to ask the question and give ourselves kind of this look in the mirror about access to what? Because right now, you know, access without success is a hollow promise. And what we need to give students access to is complete programs where they can earn a certificate or degree, as opposed to, in large urban colleges, literally a phone book of assorted courses.
Bill, what's your thought about the completion agenda? Do we need it? Why do we care?
I think it's already been well said, and I can't add to that.
So could I ask you? Oh, go ahead.
But in listening to my colleagues talk, I thought about the private institutions, the private for-profit institutions, and I've thought a lot about why students, low-income students, students of color, are so attracted to those programs. And I believe that they're attracted to those programs because the people who are selling that educational package are saying to them, we will help you get what you want. You know, start with us, we'll get you to the finish line, and we'll get you a market-valued credential. When we had our focus in community colleges and in higher education in general on access, we never set forth that proposition that we will help you complete what you start. And I believe that with ATD, we are now saying we are going to help you complete what you start, whatever it is you want to do, and we'll do it with high quality. And I think if we continue in our reform network to do the good work that has been done, then the students who are, prospective students who are out there will see that if they come to a community college of high quality, that they will be able to complete what they start, and we will increase access as a result of our completion rates. And that's another reason that I think completion is critically important. It's important for human reasons, as Steve said, but it's also important for economic reasons and for citizenship reasons. I mean, the better educated our citizenry, the better quality all of our lives, the higher quality all of our lives will be.
So I want to thank our panel. We have, I think we have like a couple minutes. I'm trying to see, a couple minutes for maybe 2 questions from the audience. But I also just want to say that I think, you know, the challenge is we also get asked all the time, so what's the difference between achieving the dream and completion by design? There's a lot of synergies, and but yet the way that I would describe it is to say that achieving the dream is the place that you start. It's the place that you start to get a handle on your data, start to think about that entry point into college, and completion by design starts to bring you further along in terms of using your data in a deeper way, and then helping to move you more quickly to that completion rate. So they're sort of building, they run in parallel, but there are a lot of synergies between the two. Are there any questions? I can't see if there's another mic. There's a mic somewhere out there.
We could probably hear you and,
that's true.
and
We can
just
repeat.
restate your question. If you...
She's on her way. Okay.
I appreciate what you said about Sinclair promoting what your real graduates are. Can the foundations help get rid of the federal government, the state government focus on iPads, which we all know is not our true graduation rates? And can they help? I mean, we've got to do other things to try to get people to understand them. But when we keep focusing on the iPads, that sends the wrong message.
Oh my gosh, iPads, bane of everybody's existence.
Did
You should repeat the question.
Oh, sorry, you didn't hear what she said, just to me? The question was basically, can the foundations help get rid of iPads? Is that, that's how I summarized it.
Will you do that for us?
Yeah, will we do that? Will we do that this afternoon? I think that was your question. But, in all seriousness, iPads is something that we do understand the challenges, because there are all of these nuances that we talked about earlier. It is something that a number of foundations are very interested in. They're involved in a number of conversations. There's also the work that is happening through AACC related to the voluntary framework. So there are lots of places that we're trying to work together with community colleges and higher ed to poke holes in that. Yesterday, who was our speaker at the President's Lunch? Rosemarie talked about, so this is something that was also on her agenda. I don't know if you want to say anything about what she talked about.
Well, she said that that the Department of Education.
She's from the U.S. Department of Ed.
Yeah, that the U.S. Department of Education has a committee that is actually focusing in on trying to improve the data collection and analyses on a national scale. And so she was hopeful that that some changes would be made. Maybe not get rid of iPads, but but make it more useful and meaningful for the colleges.
And it's the tricky thing is that Sinclair has a round numbers of 10% graduation rate based on the iPads measure, but and then we've said that's not accurate. We tell everybody that's not accurate, but the trap is, well, then what is your true rate? And then I say 68. We have a 68% success rate. Yeah.
You have someone
There's
standing.
a question. Yeah, thank you. This Joyce Romano from Valencia College. We have found in our work that the mental models that you start with to inform the work is very important in terms of driving how you're scaling and all the things you want to achieve. And Dr. Johnson, I appreciate your comment about students are not widgets. And I have to say, I continue to be bothered by the imagery that's used, even in the lovely video that we saw, of the gears and then students coming out of the gears. And it's all very much on an industrial model of production and the assembly line. And we all know as educators that doesn't fit what we experience every day in working with students. So I'm wondering, does completion by design have a set of mental models that it's starting with, or is that part of the work that you're trying to discover that? Again, Dr. Johnson, the comment you made about student systems matching with the college systems, and that's what I mean about a mental model. I mean, that's a way of thinking about the work. So What's the mental models driving this, or is that part of what you're discovering?
I would say it's first, it's part of what we are discovering as we're going through the planning year, working through the three cadres colleges, Stark, Lorraine, and Sinclair, and we're not done with the planning year yet. But there's this reconciliation that we're trying to work through, the reconciliation of treating each and every human being, unique person, unique student as they are unique, with the fact that we're set up for, mass customization, or we're set up as a factory in a sense. We're set up to look at students en masse. So to reconcile that in some way that is more effective than what we're doing now.
And I think, to your point, I think it is evolving. So the research is leading us to a different set of choices than we might have guessed. So programs of study has become this thing like, wait a second, that's a great way to organize the work, as opposed to this, as you were talking about, this kind of traditional gear manufacturing approach. And I think through that, the other thing that has evolved is the colleges are identifying these groups of students. So as Nan referenced, there are students at a number of I think almost all of the colleges that have students with 30 credits or more still not on their way to a degree. So I think that's changing the way that we're thinking about the work. We might have gone into this, we went in saying, oh, Dev Ed, we know we're losing lots of people there, but the rest of that I think is starting to evolve based on the data that we're seeing from the colleges. Okay, I'm going to take 2 questions, and then, because I actually have the sign that said we were to wrap, but we'll take 2.
Good morning. The question that I have for the panel, any one of you, is sometimes when you start to have conversations about completion at a community college, you'll hear people come back with, well, maybe the student's goal isn't to complete. Maybe they just want to take a couple of classes and transfer. So how is it that you kind of mediate that part of the discussion and move it towards a more productive conversation about completion?
I would say at Sinclair, I'll be brief. I'll say at Sinclair, we are currently doing a poor job of really truly understanding each and every individual student's true intention and goals as they come into college. We do ask them if they're degree seeking and if they're career oriented or transfer, but they seem to tell us one thing and behave in another way. So we don't have, we're not doing a good job, and we need to improve our understanding on the input side.
And is Kay McClenny in here? Kay, see Kay, because she has a great answer to that question. She's asked that or I don't know if we can get a mic to you quickly enough, but can we get a mic to her? Kay, you wander up, and while we get the next question, and then you can answer.
Mine is not a question; it's an observation, and it's about language that we use when we describe things. The comment that was made about urban colleges having a phone book of assorted courses, I think we need to move cautiously with that kind of language when we are describing what's going on at the colleges. I happen to work at many of the urban colleges in the Achieving the Dream initiative, and on behalf of the faculty and the staff and the folks who work in those institutions, I think they would find that characterization of the work at those institutions offensive. So I would think that on a national platform like we have here, with so many people in the audience, I'm hoping that we will look at the language that we use and model the behaviors that we're talking about.
My apologies, I shouldn't have used those terms. I came out of a large urban college, and I just meant to say that, literally we had thousands, we had, 125,000 students, and we had thousands and thousands of courses and programs. And for so many of our first generation students who were coming to us, where we did not have the number of advisors to really sit down and go through with them what it all meant, what we found that they did a lot of wandering until they could connect with what they wanted to do. So my apologies for that.
Well, hey, Kay, you didn't know you'd be part of the panel.
I do everything you tell me to, Suzanne. Okay, so like many other people in this room, I'm in 1 or 2 or 3 or more community colleges virtually every week, and we're all talking about completion. And within about, a nanosecond after I talk about the importance of completing certificates and degrees, somebody in the room is going to say, but many of our students just come here to take a course or a couple of courses. And my response comes, as you well know, in several parts. The first one is, that's true. It is factually true that some of your students are coming to take HTML or French or whatever it is they're coming to take. So you can easily convince me that some students come to take a course or two. What you can't ever convince me of is that any of your students come to take 6 weeks of mathematics or 12 weeks of anatomy and physiology.
This is
So
why Kate has
that's
to
why in Achieving the Dream, we have a cornerstone outcome, which is successful course completion. You all know that. Students finish what they start. That's number one. Number two is what all of you have been saying. Degrees are good for people. They are good for all of our students, not just for some of our students. They are good for other people's children, not just our children. They're good for the economy. They're good for the community. As Steve said, they're good for the nation. And finally, and this is where the conversation usually stops, if your argument is that some students choose not to persist in college and choose not to graduate from college, then until that choice not to persist and not to complete is equitably distributed across groups of students by race, ethnicity, and economic background, then it is not an argument that any of us can afford to make.
Well said.
So there is no way I can follow that. But I do want to thank each of our panelists so much for this conversation. Thank you for your attention at this hour. And we really look forward to continuing to learn from you and to